No other president would have done what I did.
Let me tell you, you don't negotiate like I negotiate.
With your vote tomorrow, I will end inflation.
I will rapidly drive prices down and we will make America affordable again.
Are we still in a housing crisis?
We are 100% still in the thick of it.
You know, after 2020, everything got so much more expensive in terms of housing and everything else.
I had no idea it was going to be so much. It was quite shocking. I immediately knew that I wouldn't be able to live there anymore.
The rent's going up and you can only work so many hours in the day.
And those are designed to cause maximum pain in the United States, but have only a minimal impact here in Canada. We are protecting our workers and businesses.
Hey, welcome back to my channel. Today we're diving straight into a paradox that's playing out right across the border. In the US, tariffs on steel, aluminum, and Canadian lumber have pushed the cost of building a home higher and higher. Builders say every new project now carries an invisible surcharge, with thousands of extra dollars baked into the price tag before a single family moves in. It's a reality that makes the dream of home ownership feel like it's slipping further out of reach for America's middle class. And yet, on the Canadian side, the story feels almost upside down. While Americans are bracing for steeper bills, Canada has seen average home prices dip and mortgage rates come down. Families in Toronto, Vancouver, even mid-sized cities are feeling a pressure release just as their neighbors face new burdens. How can two countries caught in the same trade storm end up living such different housing realities? And if this divergence continues, what does it reveal about the choices each government is making and the consequences for ordinary people? Before we begin, hit that like button if you're finding this eye-opening. It really helps us beat the algorithm. But to understand why the housing gap is widening, we need to look at the root cause: tariffs. Washington's decision to impose sweeping duties on steel and aluminum, along with nearly 40% on Canadian softwood lumber, has turned construction materials into a battlefield. For the United States, where more than 4 out of 5 softwood boards used in home building once came from Canada, the policy amounts to raising the price of the single most important input in residential construction. Every additional percentage point on tariffs ripples through the supply chain, from contractors facing higher bids to buyers watching final prices climb out of reach. Canada, however, responded differently. Instead of letting its lumber sector absorb the shock, Ottawa rolled out a billion-dollar support package designed to stabilize mills, protect jobs, and keep domestic prices from spiraling. That choice doesn't erase the impact of U.S. tariffs, but it cushions the blow at home and signals that Canada is willing to shield its core industries. The result? While Americans pay more for the same wood, Canadian families see a market that, at least for now, feels steadier. If you've made it this far, you probably care. Consider subscribing to stay updated. This tariff divide is already showing up in the pace of construction. In the U.S., housing starts have slowed noticeably, with developers reporting fewer new projects breaking ground as material costs eat into budgets. Surveys suggest that 6 out of 10 builders are struggling to keep up, pointing to soaring lumber and metal prices as the main reason for delays or outright cancellations. What was once a pipeline of steady suburban growth is now marked by hesitation as companies weigh whether buyers can afford the extra burden once homes are completed. North of the border, the dynamic looks strikingly different. Canada's housing market has managed to maintain a more balanced footing. National data indicates a sales-to-new listings ratio hovering near equilibrium, signaling neither a full-blown seller's surge nor a collapse in demand. In fact, provinces such as Alberta and Quebec remain firmly in seller's market territory, with demand outpacing supply despite the global trade headwinds. The contrast could not be clearer. While U.S. builders tap the brakes, Canadian construction continues with fewer interruptions, suggesting that policy cushioning and market stability are keeping the momentum alive. Yet interest rates add another layer to this cross-border puzzle. In the United States, buyers recently caught a rare break. The average 30-year mortgage rate slipped to its lowest point in nearly a year. That drop gave a temporary boost to the housing market, with new home sales jumping sharply as families rushed to lock in slightly more affordable financing. On paper, it looks like a reprieve, an opening for the middle class to catch its breath after months of rising costs. But the relief comes with a catch. The same tariffs driving up the cost of lumber, steel, and aluminum are quietly eroding the benefit of lower borrowing costs. Even as monthly payments shrink a little, the overall price of the house continues to climb, leaving many Americans with a paradox: cheaper loans attached to more expensive homes. The headline numbers suggest momentum, but the underlying math still tilts against affordability. Canada, meanwhile, is pursuing a more deliberate strategy. With benchmark interest rates cut, average rents have been easing month after month, creating tangible breathing room for households. Added to that, restrictions on foreign purchases have redirected supply toward domestic buyers, ensuring that relief is not immediately swallowed by speculative demand. The outcome is a form of stability that looks engineered rather than accidental, a combination of monetary easing and targeted policy designed to make the housing market serve its residents first. By now, the contrast between the two housing markets is beginning to feel structural rather than temporary. In the U.S., households face what can only be described as a double squeeze. On one side, tariffs inflate the cost of basic construction materials. On the other, mortgage rates, though lower than before, still hover high enough to limit affordability. The outcome is a paradox where families pay more for less, caught between rising prices and financial constraints that refuse to ease in tandem. For many in the American middle class, the dream of homeownership is not just delayed but drifting further out of reach. Canada, by comparison, is leaning on deliberate intervention. A sharp reduction in benchmark rates, from 5% last year down to 2.5% today, has translated into meaningful relief for borrowers. At the same time, Ottawa has launched targeted programs like the multi-billion-dollar Build Canada Homes initiative, designed to accelerate affordable housing construction. These steps do not erase all pressures, but they demonstrate an attempt to actively manage the market rather than leaving outcomes to global trade currents. The two paths highlight a deeper philosophical divide. One market shaped by external shocks and reactive policy, the other steered by monetary tools and direct subsidies. Which approach proves more sustainable is still an open question, but for now, the divergence is widening, and households on each side of the border are living with the consequences. All of this translates into two very different lived realities. In the U.S., the pressure is tangible. Builders estimate that the added burden of tariffs now adds anywhere from $9,000 to $11,000 to the cost of a single home, depending on the region. To keep sales moving, some developers have resorted to deep discounts or creative financing packages, masking the true price pressures behind short-term incentives. For buyers, it creates a confusing picture. Deals look attractive on the surface, but the underlying costs remain embedded in the system, ready to resurface in higher monthly payments, unease, or diminished quality. Canadians, on the other hand, are experiencing a gradual easing. The average price of a single-family home has ticked down, giving first-time buyers slightly more room to maneuver. Renters, too, are seeing relief, with lease rates declining for nearly a year straight, a trend that runs counter to the spiraling rental costs in many American cities. It doesn't mean Canada's market is free of challenges, but the trajectory feels lighter, more manageable, and closer to the idea of housing as a social good rather than an unattainable commodity. The contrast could hardly be sharper. One side of the border breathes a little easier, while the other wrestles with a tightening grip. Placed side by side, the divergence looks less like a temporary market fluctuation and more like two distinct policy experiments unfolding in real time. Both countries are navigating the same external storm of tariffs and supply chain pressures, yet the consequences have taken them down opposite paths. In the U.S., layers of inflationary pressure stack on top of an already limited supply of affordable homes, who are already balancing precariously between rent, debt, and the hope of ownership. The idea of buying a home, long considered a rite of passage for the American middle class, now comes with uncomfortable trade-offs: choosing smaller homes than planned, moving farther away from urban job centers, or delaying the purchase into an uncertain future. Canada, meanwhile, is charting its course with an emphasis on insulation. By directing subsidies into industries under tariff pressure, cutting rates to ease financial burdens, and narrowing demand through restrictions on foreign buyers, Ottawa has attempted to engineer a softer landing. It is not a guarantee of immunity. Global price shocks can still filter through, but it does create a more controlled environment where volatility is dampened rather than amplified. For Canadian households, the effect is subtle but significant. They are navigating turbulence with guardrails in place, reducing the sense that each policy decision could tip the housing market off balance. What emerges is a sharp philosophical divide. America's reliance on protectionist tariffs as a defensive shield has had unintended social consequences, making housing less attainable even as it seeks to protect domestic producers. Canada's approach, by contrast, relies on a heavier hand of regulation and monetary adjustment, signaling a willingness to intervene in order to preserve broader social stability. Neither path is without cost. Tariffs carry political appeal but economic drag, while subsidies and controls demand ongoing fiscal commitment. The real question, then, is not which model looks stronger in the present moment, but which one can endure the next wave of shocks, whether they come from global trade disputes, financial cycles, or demographic change. Looking ahead, the stakes extend well beyond North America. If the U.S. continues to let tariffs distort its housing market, the fallout could ripple across the global economy. With a construction sector valued at more than $1 trillion, America's slowdown risks becoming not just a domestic issue, but a drag on global growth, supply chains, and investment flows. Canada, by contrast, is carving out a different image, a relatively safe destination for real estate capital in a turbulent era. By pairing monetary easing with regulatory control, it presents itself as a market where stability is part of the strategy rather than an accident of timing. This contrast does more than shape housing. It sends a signal to the world. Other nations watching this experiment may be forced to choose: emulate Canada's model of managed stability or risk repeating America's cycle of protectionist chaos. So here's the final question. If you had to choose, would you prefer to live in a country where tariffs drive up housing costs in the name of protection, or in one where intervention helps keep homes affordable, even if it means greater government control? Thanks for sticking around. If you found this valuable, like and subscribe to support more content like this.